There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not because it was the worst thing anyone ever said to me, though it was pretty close, but because of what I did next. It was the night of my daughter's engagement party, a Saturday in November, the kind of cold that settles into your bones before you even step outside. My husband Frank and I had driven 3 hours from Sudbury down to Toronto, dressed in our nicest clothes. I wore the navy dress I'd bought for my sister's retirement. Frank wore the gray suit he'd had since our youngest's university graduation. We looked fine. We looked like what we were, working people who clean up well when the occasion calls for it. The party was at the Harrisons' house in Forest Hill. If you've never been to Forest Hill, let me paint a picture. The houses don't have fences, they have stone walls. The driveways are longer than most people's front yards. The kind of neighborhood where every car parked outside costs more than what most people earn in 2 years. My daughter Claire had been with their son Gavin for almost 4 years. I liked Claire's version of Gavin. The one she described on Sunday phone calls. Thoughtful, funny, good with her dog. The one I met that night was a different person entirely. We arrived at 7. Same as the invitation said. A woman in a white blouse answered the door and took our coats without saying hello. The foyer alone was bigger than our kitchen and living room combined. Marble floors, flowers that cost more than my weekly groceries arranged on a table. Nobody was standing near. Gavin's mother, Patricia, came toward us with her arms slightly open. Not enough for a real hug, just enough to suggest one was theoretically possible. She was wearing a cream blazer and had the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "You must be Claire's parents," she said. "We've heard so much." She didn't say it warmly. Frank put out his hand. "Frank Kowalski. This is my wife Helen. We're so glad to finally meet you in person." Patricia looked at his hand a half-second too long before shaking it. I noticed. Frank noticed too, though he didn't let on. "Of course," she said. "Well, drinks are in the sitting room. Gavin's father, Randall, is around somewhere." And then she was gone. Just like that. "No, let me show you around. No, can I get you anything?" We stood there in the entrance of this house where our daughter was going to marry into this family, and we were on our own. The sitting room was full of people I didn't know. Gavin's aunts and uncles, his parents' friends, a couple of his former university roommates who all seemed to have the same haircut and the same laugh. Claire found us within a few minutes, and I could see the relief on her face when she spotted us through the crowd. She hugged me longer than usual. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," I told her. She did. She was wearing her grandmother's pearl earrings, my mother's, and a dark green dress that suited her perfectly. She looked happy mostly. There was something around her eyes, though. A tiredness I recognized from the calls lately, when she'd go quiet after certain topics. Dinner was served at a long table in the dining room, 22 people. Candles down the middle, the real silver kind. Frank and I were seated near the end, across from Gavin's Aunt Maureen and her husband, who talked entirely to each other for the first 20 minutes. The food came out in courses. It was good. I'll give him that. The first real conversation I had was with a man named Gerald, who asked what I did for work. I told him Frank and I ran a cleaning and facility services company up in Sudbury. He nodded the way people nod when they've already stopped listening. "Oh," he said, "like a maid service." "Facility services," I said. "Commercial contracts mostly. Office buildings, medical facilities, some municipal work." Right. He picked up his wine glass. That was the end of that. I didn't think much of it. You learn after a certain age that some people just aren't curious about other people's lives. It's not always malice. Sometimes it's just smallness. I ate my salmon and talked to Frank quietly and watched my daughter laugh at something across the table and thought, "This is fine. We can do this." Then dessert was cleared and Gavin stood up with his wine glass. He said some things about Claire that were genuinely sweet. How she made him better. How he couldn't imagine his life going the way it was going to go without her in it. Claire had tears in her eyes. I had tears in my eyes. Then Randall stood up and said some things about family legacy and what it means to welcome someone new into the fold. He spoke for a while. He used the word caliber once, and I felt Frank's hand tighten slightly on the table. Then Patricia stood up. She talked about Gavin growing up in this house, about the values they'd instilled in him, about what they hoped for in a daughter-in-law, all of it directed past us somehow as if Frank and I were part of the furniture. And then she said, "Of course, we do hope Claire's family will make every effort to be involved, even with—" She paused and smiled. The distance. The distance. 3 hours on the 400. Not exactly Newfoundland, I smiled back. I let it go. After Patricia sat down, Gavin leaned over and said something to her. She laughed. He looked down the table toward us, and then, loud enough that the conversation nearby went quiet, he said, "Helen, I think they might need some extra hands clearing up in the kitchen. You'd probably be more comfortable helping out back there." He said it pleasantly, with a grin, like it was a joke everyone was in on. There was a moment of complete silence at our end of the table. I want to be honest about what happened inside me in that moment, because it wasn't rage, not right away. It was something colder and quieter than that. It was recognition. I had met this kind of person before. Not often, but enough. The kind who sizes you up by your postal code and your profession and decides your worth in about 30 seconds, and then acts on it publicly because they've never once had to face a consequence for doing so. Frank had gone very still beside me. Claire was staring at Gavin with an expression I had never seen on my daughter's face before. I put my napkin down on the table, slowly set my water glass to the side, and I looked at Gavin Harrison and I said, clearly and without any heat in my voice at all, "No." Just that. He blinked. "No," I said again. "I won't be doing that." Patricia's smile had frozen completely. Randall was looking at his plate. "I apologize," Gavin said in the tone of someone who does not apologize. I heard what you were only doing," I said. Frank put his hand on my arm, not to stop me, just to say, "I'm here." I looked at my daughter across the table. Claire had not looked away from Gavin once. Her face was absolutely calm. The kind of calm that comes at her decision has been made. She stood up. She picked up her glass, set it down again, and then she said, very quietly, "Gavin, I need to speak with you outside." He looked startled. "Claire, it was outside," she said. "Please." I don't know exactly what she said to him out there on the Harrisons' front steps. I wasn't there for that conversation, but I know my daughter. I know the way she was raised, and I know that whatever she said, she meant every word of it. What I do know is what happened in the days and weeks after that November dinner. Let me back up and tell you something about our business, because it matters to what came next. Frank and I started Kowalski Facility Services in 1991. This was not a romantic founding story. We were broke. Frank had just been laid off from the mine, and I had been picking up shifts at the hospital laundry for 3 years. We had 2 kids under 6 and a mortgage that made me sick to look at. Frank had a second-hand floor buffer and a contract cleaning a dentist's office on Thursday nights. We built it from that, one contract at a time. The dentist's office became 3 dentist offices. 3 became a medical building. The medical building led us to the hospital. The hospital led to a school board contract. The school board opened a door to 2 municipal buildings. By 1999, we had 14 employees. By 2007, we had 63. We kept our heads down. That was always our philosophy. Not because we were ashamed, I want to be very clear about that, but because that's just who we are. Frank does not walk into a room and announce his net worth. Neither do I. We drove modest cars. We lived in the same house we bought in 1988. We didn't talk about our contracts at dinner parties. Claire knew we had a business. She knew it was doing well. But we had never sat her down and given her the numbers because that's not our way. You don't raise your children by telling them what's in the bank account. You raise them by showing them what work looks like. What Claire did not know, what Gavin and his family certainly did not know, was that Kowalski Facility Services held the commercial cleaning and facility maintenance contract for 4 buildings managed by a company called Crestline Property Group. Crestline Property Group managed, among other things, the building that housed the Harrison family's legal firm. I'm not saying that because I want to gloat. I'm saying it because of what happened next, and because the sequence of events matters. 3 days after the engagement party, Claire called me. She had broken off the engagement. She was calm. She told me she had seen things clearly for a while, and that Saturday night had not caused the decision so much as made it impossible to delay any longer. She cried a little, but not much. My daughter has always known how to sit with hard things. I told her I was proud of her. I told her I was sorry she was hurting. She said, "Mom, did you know about Crestline?" I said, "I did." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good." About 2 weeks later, I got a call from our contracts manager, a wonderful woman named Diane who has worked with us for 11 years. She told me Randall Harrison had called our office directly. He wanted to discuss the Crestline contract. He'd apparently been on the phone with Crestline's property manager and had learned, I'm still not certain exactly how, that Kowalski Facility Services was the name behind the cleaning and maintenance for his building. He wanted to know if there was any issue going forward. I told Diane to let him know our contract terms were decided at the corporate level with Crestline, not by individual tenants, and that our service quality would remain exactly what it had always been, because that's what we do regardless of anything else. Frank thought I should have said more. I disagree. What we said was exactly enough. About a month after that, I heard through Claire that Gavin had told people in their shared social circle that the breakup was mutual, that they'd both felt the timing was off. I wasn't surprised. People like that rarely face their own behavior directly. What did surprise me, the thing I honestly didn't expect, was the call from Claire a few months later. She had run into Patricia Harrison at a grocery store in Leaside. Patricia had approached her. She had apologized. She said the words out loud, that what happened at the dinner was inexcusable, that Gavin's behavior had come from somewhere she should have corrected a long time ago, and that she was sorry for her own part in it. Claire told me she accepted the apology. I've thought about that a lot since, whether I would have been able to do the same. I honestly don't know. I'm 64 years old. I have spent the better part of my adult life cleaning other people's spaces, hospitals, schools, office buildings, the kinds of places where people go to do what the world considers important work. I have been looked past and looked through more times than I can count. I have been called the cleaning lady by people standing right in front of me. I have had doors held slightly longer than necessary for Frank and me to pass through, as though we might not know how doors work. But I have never, not once, thought less of what we do. Not for a single day. There is a dignity in this work that people who've never done it don't understand. To enter a building in the early morning before anyone else arrives, to leave every surface clean and every room ready for the people who will use it. There is something deeply human in that. You are caring for the place where someone will spend their day. You are making it possible for their work to happen. When I walk into a hospital corridor that my team has just cleaned, I think of the nurses who will walk through it, the patients who will be wheeled along it. I am part of something larger than myself. I have always known that. Gavin Harrison does not know that. His mother is beginning to. I don't tell this story to settle a score. Frank would say I should tell it just to have it told, and he's probably right. But I'll be honest, there is a part of me that wants other people who do this kind of work, who have ever been made to feel less than in a room full of people who thought they knew your worth at a glance, to hear it. We built something, starting from nothing, in a city that did not make it easy, with hands and hard work and 30 years of early mornings and late nights and payroll runs that sometimes kept me up until 2 in the morning making sure everyone got paid on time. We raised a daughter who walks out of rooms that don't deserve her. And one November night when a young man in a Forest Hill dining room assumed I belonged in the kitchen, I looked at him and said no. Not angry, not loud, just clear. That's the thing about having built something real. You never have to prove it. You just have to know it yourself. Frank says I should be proud of how I handled it. He's usually right about these things. Claire is doing well. She's been promoted at her firm. She works in environmental law. Another thing I think about when I'm signing contracts with municipal clients. She has a good apartment in the annex, a rescue dog named Percy, and a circle of friends who actually deserve her. Last spring, we had her up to Sudbury for a long weekend. She and Frank walked around the lake property we finally bought 2 years ago, the one we talked about for decades. She sat on the dock with her coffee in the morning and said, "Mom, this is really beautiful." I sat down next to her. I said, "We know." I've been thinking about what actually made that night go the way it did, not the dinner, not the words Gavin said, or the way Patricia smiled at the wrong moment. I mean the longer thing, the 30-year thing. Because here's what I've come to understand. How a moment lands depends almost entirely on what you carried into the room with you. And Frank and I walked into that Forest Hill dining room carrying 3 decades of early mornings, of payroll runs, of contracts we fought for and employees we looked after and a business we built from a secondhand floor buffer and one Thursday night dentist office. Nobody in that room knew any of that, but we knew it, and that made all the difference. When Gavin said what he said, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't humiliated, not really, not in the way he intended. Because you can only be diminished by someone else's opinion of you if some part of you believes they might be right. I didn't believe that. I haven't believed that in a very long time. That's not arrogance. That's just what happens when you built something real with your own hands. You stop needing other people to confirm your worth. What I keep thinking about is Claire. The way she stood up from that table. The way she said his name. Quietly. Without drama. With complete certainty. She didn't do that because I raised her to fight back. I didn't raise her to fight back. I raised her to pay attention, to notice when something is wrong, and to take it seriously. To understand that the way someone treats people they consider beneath them tells you everything you need to know about who they are when it counts. She had been paying attention for a while. Saturday night just made it impossible to look away. There's a cause and effect in how people's choices catch up with them, and it has nothing to do with luck or timing. Gavin spent years building a version of himself that worked in certain rooms with certain people, as long as nobody looked too closely. That kind of thing is sustainable until it isn't. You eventually put yourself in a room where the performance fails, where the assumptions are wrong, where the person you've decided to look through turns out to be someone you needed. That's not punishment. That's just reality asserting itself. And Patricia coming to find Claire months later? I've sat with that. I think she looked at what her son had built and saw clearly, maybe for the first time, what she had contributed to it. That takes something. Not courage exactly. More like honesty. The kind that arrives late but arrives nonetheless. I don't have a tidy way to wrap this up because life doesn't work that way. What I have is this. 64 years of learning that dignity isn't something anyone can hand you, and it isn't something anyone can take. You build it the same way you build anything. Slowly, in the early mornings with your hands, one day at a time. And when someone tries to tell you it was never yours to begin with, you put down your napkin, you look them in the eye, and you say no. That's all it takes. Just that one clear word.